Hello, everyone. It's Monica with Rooted with Joy. I'm so glad you could join us today. I have a good treat for you today. My really good friend Stephanie Castle is here with me. I call her my God-appointed friend. You'll find out later why I do that. But she's also my business partner at Refining Grace Counseling. And so welcome, Stephanie. How are you?
How are you doing today, Monica?
I'm doing awesome. Yeah. Yeah, well, if you don't mind, maybe start whatever you want to share with our audience, what's good to know about you.
Okay. Well, my name is Stephanie Castle. I have a master's in marriage family therapy. I went to Indiana Wesleyan University, and then I've worked a few different places in the Indianapolis area, but ultimately started Refining Grace Counseling around 2019. Um, really just to build a Christian integrative licensed therapy place in town. So we're kind of a collective of therapists, and we do all kinds of different counseling. I predominantly focus on couples, individual, some domestic violence recovery, some family of addictions, things like that. I really like being able to bring faith into the room in those situations. Also married. I've been married 31 years, and we have a daughter who's 21, and working her butt off in college and working, and we're really proud of her as well. So
Yeah, she's awesome. I love going in there. So anyway, well, what made you want to be a counselor in the first place?
I think I've always had the gift of connecting with people easily. I'm a super extroverted person. Some people collect things. I think I collect people. You're similar in that way, Monica. I think uh, we both like being part of something. I'm part of people doing something of purpose, and we are both eclectic when it comes to people. We like people of lots of different personality, creeds, and it's just fun to have variety in life. So I think from a very young age, people just started talking to me about everything going on in their life, and I just felt really drawn to care about them and be praying for them. I've had a faith my entire life. I really don't remember a time when I wasn't actively communicating with God in prayer. Have my own trauma background that I probably won't get into today, but because of that, um, it solidified my need for Jesus, and just my gratitude for the way he walks with me.
Awesome. Yeah. So, did you grow up in a Christian home or?
I did. Both my parents were Christian. They were both brought up in church. My dad was brought up in a Methodist church. My mom was brought up in a Disciples of Christ church, and mostly we went to a Methodist church growing up. Although when I was moved out and married, had my daughter, my parents started going to a Disciples of Christ church down in New Albany. So they mixed it up later in life, I guess. But I was raised mostly Methodist, and then transitioned on my own to more of an evangelical setting in high school. My parents have always been very open about letting me try different friends' churches and figure out what I thought for myself. So that's been helpful.
That's cool if they let you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. hmm Um, what made you go to decide Indiana Wesleyan?
Honestly, I felt called there. I looked at a lot of different colleges, felt super called to go to Indiana Wesleyan, and didn't right away. So we grew up in, my husband and I grew up in southern Indiana. So I still have my southern twang. It's not going anywhere apparently. But so I've always had it. But we grew up in New Albany, near Louisville, Kentucky, and so I felt called to Indiana Wesleyan and started going to the Louisville Presbyterian Seminary anyway because wasn't ready to move. I didn't want to relocate. I kind of wrestled with God about that. And academically, I did very well at the seminary, but I was having anxiety, some panic. Sometimes I'd just sit in my car outside of class feeling really anxious. Um, I couldn't explain it. I think I was just not where God really wanted me to be, and I think God has always used my anxiety a little bit to move me into um, curiosity and seeking his just his direction, I guess. So it moved me into a place of discernment. I didn't really feel like that was where I needed to be, and I left and took a few years just working and praying and trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. And ultimately, our family decided to relocate. Dave and I moved, and we were also struggling with getting pregnant. Actually, at the time, we had not been having any luck, and so we were weighing: do we completely uproot our lives and move to Marion, Indiana, or do we focus on trying to get pregnant, maybe getting IVF or some other support? And then after we relocated, I ended up getting pregnant unexpectedly after 10 years of marriage. So, and now we have my daughter, who's 21 now. So, God works in mysterious ways. I think everything in my life was just put on hold until I was willing to do the thing that I was supposed to do. And I've never been happier at a school than I was at Indiana Wesleyan. So we lived near the campus for the first 2 years, and then I finished my program in Indianapolis. We relocated there so that my husband could work, and that's when I found out I was pregnant. He was having better luck finding work and more in the Indy area than Marion. So, and then ultimately that's how we met, because my husband and I relocated to Indianapolis to finish school. So,
Yeah, because we actually met when you were pregnant.
I was very pregnant when we met. And I think I was like, it would have been like October, November of 2004. So I
Okay,
had
you could get the exact time frame because you were pregnant. Yeah. So
yeah, yeah, it's crazy. So
yeah, because I remember being in one of the first classes at Indiana Wesleyan, and you came in to talk about the honor society and things like that, and we were talking in the back,
yeah,
and
I was the mentor chair for Chi Sigma Iota, which is the Honor Society for Counselors, which is hilarious because I have learning disabilities, dyslexia, visual processing disorder, all these issues, and so school's always been very hard for me. But Indiana Wesleyan, well, really all of grad school, like the seminary and Indiana Wesleyan, I just did very, very well, and I think just the process of overcoming and finding those ways to overcome the learning disabilities, and also just being in your sweet spot, what you're supposed to be doing, also really helps with transcending all of that. So I was super excited to be a part of that organization, and the mentor chair part of the job was to go into classrooms with other students who had not been at the school as long and talk about counseling and integrative counseling and the value of that. And so that's what I was doing in your classroom.
okay, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I remember more our conversation than what you actually said in front, but because we
Right, I'm
repeated several
sure.
times. Yeah,
Because it was so crazy what it led to. Yeah, it was a weird
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. So that's awesome now. So yeah, because you had to overcome a lot then, basically get to where you were at that point in life.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. So, but what was crazy is you'd been praying. It sounds like you had mentioned you'd been praying about God giving you a friend, and if
Yeah.
you're going to do grad school.
Well, that's true. Yeah, because a little bit about how I ended up at Indiana Wesleyan. Like, I won't get into all my story today either, just kind of more where we're at with refining grace um and how this particular story with our friendship. Yeah, I had already um I had moved
Yeah.
to Indy after having like a hard time. Like it led to like where I eventually had to file bankruptcy um for what happened in the past or whichever. But I had moved to the west side because I felt like God wanted me to be a therapist. And I was well, okay, there were several reasons why I was conflicted about this, okay? Yes. So one was okay, I was still healing. You know what I mean? I still had what I would call like a tortured mind. You know what I mean? And so I was like, now, why would I feel like God wants me to start grad school when I can't? When I struggle each day with my mental health back then. I mean, that was definitely a reality back then. Yeah. And so that was one. Two, I wasn't married. I felt like God told me it was going to be a while even before I got married. And and I felt like he wanted me specifically to be a marriage and family therapist. And I was like, okay, all right. Um,
How does that
you
make
know,
sense? What are you
yeah,
doing?
it doesn't make sense. And another thing too, like I looked up how much therapists were supposed to make, because prior to this, I did financial advising, right? That was what I was trying to do before my life kind of imploded at that point. It didn't make financial sense to me. Um, okay, I'm picking out Indiana Wesleyan. It was expensive to go to Indiana Wesleyan. I don't know how much it was at the time, but I remember looking at the figures back then, and the expected salary for a therapist when I looked it up on the internet back then was between $30,000 and $50,000. Okay, and so I was like, this is a stretch for me, and I was broke. That was another barrier, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay. Yeah, so those are all the things. And plus, I was still painfully shy. That was another thing. And so there was a lot of my own internal battles going on at the time. Uh, but I feel like, okay, how, before we get to our meeting or things like that, there was a couple things that, okay, because at the time before um, I think I was applying to grad school. I was living at my parents' house again, okay? Because I had moved out. I had moved to Arizona. Things didn't work out in Arizona, and I decided to move back to go to grad school, okay? But, again, I was broke at that time, and so temporarily I was living at my parents' house, and I was just praying to God. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I go, one, I can't live at my parents' house anymore. I just can't. Um, Two, if you're, because I felt like God was telling me it was going to be a bit before I got married. I didn't know how long or whichever. I was like, I need to have a friend. I need to have like a really loyal friend through this because I'm going to be around all these married people and I'm probably going to think that they're more mentally sound than me. And I'm going to feel bad about myself, at the time. And so I'm just like, I need somebody to help me get through this. Right. And so, what so I needed like to have a roommate. So Heidi um was the roommate, but before I picked her in particular, I felt like when I was having my conversation with God about this, I felt like he was saying, well, okay, put an ad out. And I felt like the sense was when the person says, I'm a Christian too. So I put on there that I was going to Indiana Wesleyan University as a grad student. So that was me saying I'm a Christian without saying I'm a Christian on there. And so I felt like the response was the person was going to say, oh, I'm a Christian too. And that was going to be my future roommate. And she was. She was my future roommate. We moved in together. It actually turned out really well. And that was the apartment I lived in when I met you, right? And so then when we met, and we were chatting up, getting to know each other, stuff like that. Now I know one of us was like, "Oh, I live on the west side," right? And the other one was
And
like,
we were like, oh, I do too. Oh, I live, in Speedway area. It's like, oh, I do too.
"Yeah."
It's like, oh, I live at this particular apartment complex. And you were like, I do too.
And then I was like, "This is my address," and you're like, "That's mine
Holy
too."
crap. That's
And,
mine too. We were like,
yeah,
you're literally just upstairs. It was the craziest thing of
yeah.
all of Indianapolis. We were in the same apartment building, just one floor apart, I think.
Well, no, I was on the third floor. You on the
Were you on the third? Okay, I was on
yeah,
the first. Yeah.
yeah. And so
Crazy.
it was
I
nuts.
remember
And it was,
saying, we're supposed to be friends.
yeah. Because that was
Nuts.
just too coincidental. I was just like, okay, I don't, yeah, out of all of Indianapolis, Indianapolis is not a small city per
No,
se.
there were people coming from all over to the school.
Right. Yeah, because they lived like all over the place. And so some of them didn't even live in Indy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, my mind was like blown that I was like, what? Yeah, we live in the exact same. And we had never met. I had never remember seeing you
I
up
never
to that
once seen you
point.
in all. No, no.
Yeah. So it was nuts, right? And so,
Crazy. And we just started doing walks around the apartment complex, like just trying to get to know each other.
uh-huh.
And then I felt very blessed by your friendship when I had my daughter, because we weren't taking the same classes necessarily because I was a couple years ahead. And so you were willing to help babysit so my husband could work, and I could go to school and I was working a internship, and it was so much. It was so much on my plate all at once. Would not have necessarily chosen grad school, and I had a difficult pregnancy, and it meant so much to have a friend up there dealing with all of that, and it was just a lot. And so, like, my family basically adopted you as family. Like, my husband calls you
Mhm.
Mo.
Yeah.
You're one of very few. He's like super picky about people he lets in his life, and you're one of the very few safe people. And when he gives you a nickname, you're in. So, um,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been, yeah, we still consider you part of our family. My daughter's known you her entire life. It's just amazing.
Well, yeah, and you're part of our family too. I mean, you were like the matron and honor of my wedding. So, I mean, it's just been awesome. I mean, like um, I just say like, I like it when God picks out my friends. So,
Right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's good. Yeah, and we were able to take some classes together. Like, then we do like integrative, like,
Oh, were you in that one? Yeah.
yeah,
Was it Dr. Dobbs with Dr.
yeah,
Dobbs?
yeah, we were in that one together.
Yeah.
I know we didn't get to do very many together because you were ahead of me, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
loved that class so much. It's probably my
Yeah,
favorite.
we were driving together to go to that class.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah,
kind
I
of fun.
remember. I wish I could find it somehow in one of our moves I've lost. And switching laptops and stuff. I wrote my senior paper for that class was God as the original attachment figure, like secure attachment. So I was taking biblical ideas of attachment theory and sort of expanding on those. And so I still use a lot of attachment in counseling. So it was a really good class.
That was a really good class. I remember that one in particular being. I mean, really, I really loved the education we got there.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a really good school. So, yeah.
Well, and then we both went on to do some work at the Christian Theological Seminary too, weren't you there?
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
you
I was
did some of
behind
that.
you
So we
because, I
both
mean,
did.
again, you were
Yeah,
ahead of me.
work at the Christian Theological Seminaries. I feel like at some point our educations very much merged into similar pathways.
Right. Yeah, because I did, I went and did my residency for a year at CTS. I mean, I know that we had prayed about it, and I felt like we always had a sense we were going to do practice together at some point.
Sure.
I know I tell people that I kind of went on my own little side quest before we did
You
that.
had
But
to. You were getting grad school paid off. It's hard when it's one income, so you had to do some other things. I had a little bit of scholarship money and then loans, um, but I remember you. Um, when you moved more out to the Bloomfield, Linton area, I was like, it was so sad. But we stayed in touch, and I was so happy when you moved back closer, and we could start thinking about maybe getting in the same practice. So,
yeah, yeah, no, I did a program. It was called the National Health Service Corps, was what it was. And so
yeah,
I did end up with all my time that I did, like I got like all my student loans paid off, which ended up being $120,000. And so it
it
was
was
not
a
cheap.
good side quest, very lucrative
Well,
side.
I learned a lot on the side quest. Yeah,
Yeah, you did.
it was, yeah, it was beneficial, but yeah, it was difficult though. Yeah, because I mean, at the time when we were living in India, I was very connected to the church I went to at the time, and it was a large church, but um it was just like really sad. Well, I mean, it was like, okay, I have to do this, because as a single person, because it's not easy starting out in counseling.
No, it's not. No, you definitely have to pick a like it is sort of pay your dues. Like there's a
Yeah,
pay your dues.
it's definitely a pay your dues career. I mean, I know that there's some careers like that, but I I feel like counseling's unique, and it can be, especially if you are choosing to do private practice. It's like definitely a pay your dues kind of. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, residency. I did two different residencies at the same time and worked a job for a while too. And that was in an admin and a counseling at the counseling center at East 91st Street for a little bit. And I worked with Sally Groff and Associates, and I worked at the Christian Theological Seminary some for I don't know, a year or so. And ultimately, then I got into practice with Dr. Jim Craig at Northern Light Christian Counseling, and I was there for a good long time, probably a decade. So
Mm-hmm.
at some point in there, you moved back, I think, to the Lafayette area, and you
Right.
ended up. You were a director of a counseling place for a while. Was it Delphi, Indiana?
Yeah, it was in
Yeah,
Delphi. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah. And then, yeah, and at some point, Dr. Craig decided to retire, and the people from that practice had approached me separately, asking if I wanted to start something. So we were all sort of feeling out who was going to start what. But I started Refining Grace Counseling, and it just was a great time for you. You came over pretty. Seemed like it was pretty quickly. I don't think we were practicing very long before you were right there partnering with us and all that.
Yeah, we can get more detailed about that coming. Yeah, I'm just want to back up a little bit because when you were saying you were working different jobs at CTS, I remember at the time because I mean, you did get paid a little bit at CTS, but you paid for your supervision too, and
Yes,
that's a lot of it.
yes.
Like, because
You,
I mean, if you work full
you have to
time,
pay for supervision a lot of places. Not every place,
yeah,
but a lot of places.
yeah. But I mean, if you work full time as a counselor, it takes a good 2 years before you get fully licensed,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, at least.
And so, I mean, different people have different paths, but I mean, I basically was broke like during that. So I remember like I was delivering
Very
pizzas and
poor
substitute
prepared for that,
teaching,
but yeah.
and then I was a server. So I think sometimes I worked like 3 jobs to support my counseling habit. That's what I would tell people. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
I
remember
remember at
that?
one point you were delivering pizzas, like you did everything.
I know I was a server at Charlie's. I worked at FedEx, and if I had to work more, I was a substitute teacher. You know what I mean? I did what I had to do, basically.
It takes a certain amount of drive. So it doesn't come easy for most. Like,
Yeah,
it's a
right.
commitment.
And
And
so,
it was just such a calling, I think, for us both. So we were willing to do what we could.
yeah, no, I was willing to do it. It just, I remember though. Okay, so like how I found out about the National Health Service Corps, because I like we're talking. You were there. I mean, I was working 3 jobs, or a lot of times. So I just got aggravated one day, and I was just like, there's nurses can find help to pay for their degree.
Uh-huh.
All these helping professions can. Why there has to be something for counseling. There has to be something, and I found it. And yeah, the criteria was you had to work in a rural area, an underserved, not necessarily rural,
Underserved.
underserved area. And when I looked it up at the time, there were a few different places, and so yeah, so with that, because I did try to find a job in Indy to be an associate, you know what I mean, before I got licensed. But they wanted you to have experience, and I didn't have experience yet because, I'm trying to get licensed and stuff like that. So I was just like, I'm like, so the criteria to get your student loans paid off, you had to be licensed and you had to apply to it, and you had to be currently at the job to get the money that they would pay out, basically. And so I was still a year out from getting licensed, and I was just like, I might as well set up the job. I might as well. I'm deciding to do this, so I can't find a job here necessarily, so I might as well just go for it. So I did. I found a job um, working in Linton, Indiana, very small town, and it was an hour and a half away from Indianapolis, and so I was like, well, there's no way I'm gonna commute over there, and plus two, I was doing community mental health, and I feel like most counselors, when you're going to grad school, most people do not want to do community mental health. That's usually the no. If I have to do that, I'd rather, I don't know. Like,
Well, it's definitely more stressful. It's definitely a bigger caseload. And I get some people who are really called into that um,
yeah.
environment, but it has a higher burnout rate than private
Well, right,
practice
yeah, because
for
you work
sure.
long hours, and
Yeah,
you know they usually schedule you
it
back to
is
back to back
really
to
true.
back, and there's paperwork and you know more difficult clientele. But anyway, so I was working at a community mental health center down there um, for a while, but you know it did work out for me, like the National Health Service Corps, like the first two, because so okay, you apply, you're agreeing to work there for 2 years in the beginning, and so they give you like at the time it was like a really big payout. It was like 60 grand, and so it was like sweet, you know, and it just shows up in your bank account one day, and it's tax free.
You feel rich for a minute, then you pay off of your
You know, I
loans,
took a
right?
picture of it in my bank account. It was awesome, but
I remember the phone call. What's
right.
what's in my bank account?
And you're like, yeah, it's about time. But anyway,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, once I did that goal, when I was in the middle of it, I'm like, you know, this is my goal, like to get these student loans paid off and not pay a penny of my own money. I made that my goal. You know what I mean? So I did get a play therapy certificate in there because I was working with kids a lot and
Hmm.
decided I wanted to do that, but it did defer my student loans to be able to where I didn't have to pay for money out of my own pocket too. So that is another thing that was in addition to Indiana Westland on my student loans. But yeah. Anyway, so I was down Linton Bloomfield area for like 5.5 years. Isn't that nuts? Yeah, and then I decided that the job I was in, I was just like, I can't be at this particular job anymore. It was just a lot going on at the time. And so I looked at different cities that offered it, and Lafayette didn't used to be on the list. If Lafayette was on the list before, I would have chose Lafayette first, but it was not on the list before. I know this, and so Lafayette became an underserved area, and so then I got a job up there, and that was closer to you. Like Lafayette, you moved to Lebanon. Like when we met each other, we lived on the west side, but I'm like, well, that's
Lebanon. I had friends from New Albany that lived in Lebanon, and so and we knew a little bit about the area and ended up there. Yeah.
uh-huh. Yeah. So I was like, well, Lafayette will work out way better. You know, Stephanie's up there, other friends are up there. Yeah, I'm not so far removed. There's stores in Lafayette. It's awesome. You know, like Lafayette, if you're not familiar, it's kind of like a mid-sized city in Indiana. So Purdue University's there. So yeah. So anyway, so that I was at that job for 4.5 years, but I also kind of did like there was a Christian counseling place there temporarily called Wellsprings Counseling. I did that while I worked at the
Yeah.
other job. But the plan was okay, Stephanie, when my student loans are forgiven, I will partner with you and eventually I won't live in Lafayette anymore, that
Right.
type of thing.
We'll figure it out. We'll be working the same place somehow. We knew that.
Somehow, some way. Right. And then, yeah. And then in the middle of that, that was when I was the director at Delphi for, you know, a couple years there. And then, yeah. And then I was in Lafayette probably like a year or so after that, I think. And then, yeah. And then well, I was still in Lafayette when I teamed up with you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I was still working at the other place in Lafayette I was working at. So, um, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
okay.
you were really dipping your toe in the water of like, do I stay up here or do I go down there? And it gave you a chance to sort of feel out everything at once, I think, which is typical of you. You're usually doing more than one thing at a time. So, yeah. How did you-
Okay, yeah. So I decided to go full time. What was Refining Grace Counseling? It was funny. Like I quit my job February of 2020, right? Because I worked there the last day of February because I had already planned to go to Israel, and I went to Israel March 1st through the 15th of 2020, and I remember at the time when I was in Israel, like, just people freaking out, like, where's toilet paper? Everybody was-
I was really worried about you getting back. Like I was just kept praying, Lord, let her get home before she has to quarantine. Like, don't you make her stuck in a foreign country. I was,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
because at the time, well, okay, it's because we were supposed to fly back through Spain, and the Spain airport shut down to American passengers. And so we had to spend another day in Israel. And so at the time they were like, well, we're going to spend another day in Israel. And I'm like thinking in the back of my mind, as long as it's only like one more day,
I
it'll be
have a
all right.
life I gotta pay for. I gotta go to work and back home.
Yeah. But then we flew out through Amman, Jordan, to get back home. And so I made it back home, and then yeah, and then the country was on lockdown.
Yeah, almost immediately when you got here. It's crazy.
Yeah. And prior to that, I had never done telehealth counseling.
Same.
Yeah, so we had to get a crash course on, just
I
doing
know.
that.
I realized that I was already paying for something through Google, through our program we had with Google Suite that it was already being paid for. So I had to get a quickly figure it out. And so people took a little bit of time off, and then I think everybody realized if they were going to do therapy, they were going to have to do it from their house. We started scheduling a lot of online sessions. That was an interesting time because on top of Refining Grace Counseling, also help facilitate a Christian counseling networking group. And so we're counselors from all over Indianapolis, like mostly the north end. Like it's a lot of east and north, or east and west, north side counselors that come, but we weren't able to meet for a while either. Like we did. It felt like the Brady Bunch. There were several squares, and we would meet. And then we started being able to meet outside in the Northview Christian Life parking lot. So we did that once a month too. But it was a heavy time for I think, well, for everybody. But us therapists were carrying a lot of pastors and counseling, church staff, and a lot of nurses and a lot of teachers out there doing that, and we were really sitting down on the front lines virtually with so many people in these really difficult essential jobs, and them trying to also acclimate to quarantine. It was a weird time.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Did you already talk about like how it transitioned from Northern Light to Refining Grace?
Oh, just that Jim had retired. Yeah, Dr. Craig retired, and yeah, that I started the practice after he retired, and in a way like a lifeboat to give us all somewhere to go and grow. And
Hmm.
so, and two, I would say Refining Grace Counseling at that point, by the time the pandemic hit, we were in two locations. I think we were in Zionsville, and we were still inside Traders Point Christian Church for a while. When the pandemic hit, obviously we couldn't have people in their building, and they had considered doing some reorganization of office space and all of that. So we got a call from Hope Healthcare. They were actually looking for some counselors to be in their non-for-profit counseling or medical facility. They offer insurance to the uninsured. They're a ministry. And so a couple of our counselors that live in Brownsburg went to Avon to work in their building, representing Refining Grace Counseling down there. And we're still down there. We still have we have one office down there. And then eventually, so we kept that in Zionsville, and then also we are inside Central Christian Church in Lebanon, which I've had that office since I was with Northern Light. It's been an amazing relationship with the staff out there at Central Christian in Lebanon. They're fabulous, and so but we pray a lot about like where are we supposed to be. Like I think all of
Hmm.
us really had a vision that we would like to have a counseling house to work out of. We didn't necessarily need to own it, but we wanted to be able to be in more of a relaxed setting, something just that felt like it was like a holding place, like a safe place for people to come. So, a couple years ago, New Hope had this huge house next to their church come open for a new ministry, and I wasn't aware that it was open. I
Mhm.
set up a meeting with Pastor Rob um, from New Hope to talk about, hey, my family really likes this church, and we think we're going to start coming more regularly. I just wanted to ask some questions, and he realized I was a counselor and asked if we were looking for space. Like, well, we've been driving around Whitestown praying about, Whitestown, Zionsville. Like, are we supposed to be in a house at some point? I prayed out loud many times in my car. Hey, God, if there's a house available, could you help me figure out what that looks like? And I didn't have any particular house in mind. I actually kind of freaked out because this house is so big. It was a little overwhelming. But I told him I was curious. I was interested, and we'd pray about it. And I remember a conversation with you, and you were very like, let's vision cast. And I'm like, I'm scared to vision cast. Like, I'm holding it real loosely. Like, God's going to have to tell me if we get it first. I don't know. I don't know. So I went through a process with the elders, met with them, and eventually we got an offer um, to work out of this house, the Wiley house, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's been a pretty big blessing to have office space together. Now instead of sharing an office, you and I have offices next to each other. We still share the Lebanon office, but it's really nice to
Mhm.
also have our own space and be able to work somewhere at the same time and get to hang out a little on breaks and stuff. It's so nice. And so we have 6 offices in this Whitestown location, and it'll be 2 years in March.
Mhm.
It's pretty
Yeah,
exciting.
that's a beautiful house and location. I just feel like so blessed here.
And
Yeah.
yes, and we've been able to grow. So I think there's 8 therapists and a discipleship coach, Tom Dillo, as well as hanging with all of us. The website is refininggracecounseling.com, so people can go look at who's working here. And Jenny and Paul with our group work in the Avon location and here at Whitestown, and you and I both work in Lebanon and in Whitestown, and some of our other counselors just work in Whitestown.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's uh, it's been a real blessing.
Yeah, it's been a huge blessing for sure. But yeah, like I want to echo, yeah, because I mean, even though we share the office in Lebanon, it's nice to occasionally be able to see you on break and just
Yeah,
kind of, yeah, yeah. Because we didn't really have that before when, landing the house. I mean, we had on the Zionsville location a little bit, but that was more in an office space, and there was nothing wrong with it. It was a good building too.
and the building manager out there was wonderful.
Hmm.
I really liked Joe. Yeah,
Yeah,
in Plainsville. Yeah,
yeah, but that kind of the gift of being in the counseling house is what kind of spurred the YouTube channel and us talking together too. Because I remember talking to you and just being like, "Wow, God's really came a long way with us." You know what I mean? And we prayed for the counseling house, and it happened. You know what I mean? And I just feel like really, really blessed. You know what I mean? And I know like a couple of the therapists they have really nice well, like one of the counselors has like she have retreats at her house and everything like that, and it was just like, wow, we just have like a lot of resources, and just asking God, like, are we using the resources the way you wish, you know what I mean, and things like
yeah,
that, and so, um, yeah, and so whether that means like different counselors join our group or I don't know what's going to happen with the YouTube channel, but God can do whatever he'd like to do, right? And
yeah.
so that's what's really awesome about it, right?
Right,
And so
and then I love the idea of just impacting our community too, in
mhm,
whatever ways, whether that's through counseling. One of the things we do offer at Refining Grace is we will reduce the rate for church staff too, and
mhm,
so that's a conversation we can always have with church staff. Some of the churches in the area will reimburse or cover part of counseling for their church staff too. So it's been really amazing to be able to support just other ministry communities here um, in some
Hmm.
way as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, and things like that. And so, um, and like this conversation too. I mean, I think it's good, like, because I don't think like a lot of people really knew about the history of refining grace, or just knowing like how God shows up in lives, and he stays faithful, every step of the way and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like wanting to know people's God stories, and how God shows up in the details and that he will direct your path. I mean, you don't necessarily get the whole path. You know what I mean? You gotta like step out. Just like when we were talking about, I think like on both sides, you know what I mean? Like you step out and then God reveals something else, you know what I mean? Because I started grad school and was in class before he provided me a friend, which was you know what I mean? And
And we both were willing to work very hard and sacrifice to get where we are. So I heard it said once in a Maverick City concert. One of them said, "God, or we do the, or God does the super, or we do the natural." That's what it was.
oh, I like that. Yeah,
And
it's
I'm like,
awesome.
well, that's fair. Like that seems fair to me that we still have some agency and responsibility in the calling too. That
Uh-huh.
it's not all God. Like we definitely can't do nearly as much without Him and the resource of the Holy Spirit. But we also have a certain level of commitment and sacrifice in pursuing God's call.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, and I think like just being able to open up and hear other people's stories, because I know like
Yeah.
just there's just thinking of like all the friends or acquaintances that we have that I know they have a story that has happened in their life and we just don't have any idea. I think it helps build faith. Um, and just knowing like, okay, maybe sometimes God gives you a dream, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy sometimes either. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're both very blessed at this point to actually have really amazing partners that are supporting us and um, to go talk to and plan with as well as each other's. Also a blessing, and I would say that putting the family also in its place and giving a lot of time and energy to that as well is a part of who we are too, as well as practicing therapists and business
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and all of that. So,
For sure, yeah. And so, yeah, no, we did definitely both been blessed with really good partners. I've been, yeah, for sure. And so, even though I felt like I had to wait quite a long time, right? I was worth the wait, though. That's what I told
oh,
Matt all the time. He was definitely worth the wait. But, um,
yeah,
yeah, it was just kind of you just don't know until he's there, you're just like, oh, wow, Yeah,
yeah.
sure. And so, yeah, well, anything else coming to mind, stuff that you can think of, or?
That's the main stuff. If you think of anything else you want to ask, you're welcome. So,
Yeah, well, I think we covered a good amount today, and so yeah. So I'm so excited that you decided to join me and
absolutely.
just having this conversation, and I think this will just bless other people. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
All
And
right.
so I want to tell the audience, though, real quick before we sign off, that, I do plan to have more of these conversations. And so please subscribe, and if you have a story that you would want to share on here, just message me. And you can do that on the feed, or like my email's monica@refininggracecounseling.com. And so that would be another way to do it too. So anyway, but thank you, Stephanie, and I'll see you all later. All right. Thank you. All right.